What people don't reveal about silver that you need to grasp begins with a number. Right now, somewhere in this market, two people are both holding silver, same metal, same weight, same spot price on the screen, but one of them will turn that silver into cash by tomorrow afternoon, and the other one will spend the next several weeks watching opportunity drain away, wondering why nobody warned them. The difference between those two people has nothing to do with how much silver they own. It has everything to do with what they were never told. And that silence is exactly what this video is about. Welcome back to your OG John AG, the channel where serious people come to understand what the market is actually doing beneath the surface. Now, before we go any further, if you haven't subscribed yet, think of it this way. You wouldn't leave the house on a cold morning without your coat, would you? Don't watch this channel without subscribing. It's the one thing that keeps you warm when the financial weather turns. Hit that button. Your future self will quietly thank you. And one more thing, drop a comment below and tell us, where in the world are you watching this from? Because this message is traveling further than most people realize, and we want to know exactly how far. What people don't reveal about silver that you need to grasp begins with a number. A single, clean, confident number sitting at the top of every financial screen, every trading app, every precious metals website in the world, the spot price of silver. And for most people, that number feels like the whole truth. They look at it in the morning with their coffee. They check it again after lunch. They go to sleep believing that number tells them exactly what their silver is worth. But here's what the market quietly stopped telling them. Somewhere in a mid-sized city, a man in his late 50s had been stacking silver for 11 years. He was not reckless. He was not impulsive. He had done what every responsible investor is told to do. He diversified. He stored carefully. He watched the market patiently. And when the silver rally arrived, he felt for the first time in years that his discipline had been rewarded, and the number on his screen looked beautiful. So he made a decision. He gathered a portion of his stack, drove to his dealer, and prepared to convert a decade of patience into real usable capital. What happened next was not what the spot price had promised him. The dealer looked at what he brought, sorted it quietly, set certain pieces aside, and then quoted him a number that had almost nothing to do with what he had seen on his screen that morning. Not because the dealer was dishonest, not because the market was broken, but because the spot price had already stopped being the full story, and nobody had told him. This is the fracture that the financial headlines refuse to discuss openly. The silver market, for the first time in recent memory, began splitting itself into two distinct categories. On one side, silver that moves easily, silver that dealers want, silver that refiners accept without hesitation, silver that converts to cash the same afternoon you walk through the door. On the other side, silver that hesitates, silver that carries conditions, silver that arrives at the counter and gets sorted into a separate pile with a lower number attached to it. Same metal, same purity, completely different commercial reality. The business community was largely unprepared for this separation, because for years, silver had been treated as a relatively simple asset. Buy it, store it, watch the price, sell when ready. The logic seemed airtight, but what the rally exposed was that silver was never truly one asset. It was always several assets wearing the same price tag, and as long as the market stayed calm, that distinction barely mattered. The moment volatility arrived, the distinction became everything. Dealers began quoting differently. Refiners began prioritizing differently. Buyback programs began applying conditions that most stackers had never encountered before. And the spread, that quiet gap between what silver costs to buy and what the market will actually pay to take it back, began widening in ways that erased months of price appreciation for people who had not positioned correctly. This was not a temporary disruption. This was the market revealing its actual structure, for the first time in years. For entrepreneurs and serious investors paying attention to wealth preservation, the lesson arriving from this moment is both simple and urgent. A price on a screen is not a guarantee of liquidity. It is an invitation to negotiate under conditions you may not fully control. The man who drove to his dealer that afternoon left with less than he expected, not because silver failed him, but because he had trusted a single number to tell him a story that number was never designed to carry alone. The spot price is real, but the real price is the one waiting for you at the counter. And the distance between those two numbers is where fortunes are quietly lost. Nobody talks about the pipes. Everyone talks about the water, how high it rose, how fast it moved, how the levels changed overnight, and what the charts looked like when the surge finally hit. But the pipes, the actual infrastructure carrying that water, the refineries, the mints, the dealer networks, the buyback systems, the logistics chains holding the entire silver market together, from the moment metal leaves the ground to the moment it sits in someone's hand. Nobody talks about those until they break. Deep inside a refinery on an ordinary Tuesday morning, something changed. Not dramatically, not with headlines, not with any announcement that would reach the average investor's screen. It changed the way quiet things change when pressure builds slowly and then arrives all at once. The orders had doubled, then tripled. The floor was moving faster than the systems were ever designed to move. Workers who normally processed a predictable, manageable volume of silver were now staring at backlogs that stretched days into weeks. And the managers, standing at the front of that operation, made a decision that would ripple outward through the entire market, without a single person in the retail community ever being notified. They began prioritizing. This is the part of the silver market that serious business minds must understand completely. The silver supply chain is not a single highway with equal access for all participants. It is a network of relationships, capacities, and quiet hierarchies that function smoothly when demand is moderate, and fracture into visible tiers the moment stress arrives. When the rally hit, that stress arrived fast, and the fractures became impossible to ignore for anyone operating inside the system. Mint operations, which had been running on relatively predictable schedules, suddenly faced a fundamental problem. Raw silver was available, demand was surging, but the machinery, the labor, the die capacity, and the logistics pipelines connecting production to distribution were not designed for a surge of this magnitude. So mints did what any rational operation does under constraint. They raised premiums, they extended lead times, they quietly shifted production toward the highest margin products and away from the lower margin items that smaller buyers and collectors had come to depend on. The result was not a shortage in the traditional sense. It was something more complicated and ultimately more damaging for the unprepared participant. It was a selective availability, where silver existed in abundance on paper but arrived in the real world with conditions, delays, and costs that the spot price had never once suggested were coming. Dealer buyback systems felt the stress from a different angle. A dealer's ability to buy silver back from customers depends on their own capacity to move that silver forward into the next level of the supply chain. When refineries are backlogged, when mints are prioritizing their own pipelines, when the wholesale market is absorbing inventory at its own pace rather than the dealer's pace, the dealer's willingness to offer a clean, competitive buyback price quietly but decisively shrinks. They are not being dishonest, they are managing a pipeline that has become unpredictable. And that unpredictability transfers directly onto the seller standing at the counter, holding silver they need to convert to cash. There is a businessman's lesson buried inside all of this that extends far beyond silver. Every market has infrastructure. Every infrastructure has capacity limits. And every capacity limit remains invisible to the outside participant until the moment it is exceeded. The silver rally did not create these weaknesses. It revealed them. The refineries were always operating near their ceilings. The mint schedules were always tighter than they appeared. The dealer margins were always thinner than the spot price suggested. The rally simply turned up the pressure high enough for all of that to become visible to anyone willing to look past the headline number. Smart capital does not just ask, what is the price today? Smart capital asks, what happens to my position when the pipes get stressed? Because the pipes always get stressed eventually. And the investor who understands the infrastructure will never be surprised by what comes out the other end. There's a sound that nobody in the coin world likes to talk about. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, it does not arrive with any announcement or warning or moment of ceremony. It is the quiet, unremarkable sound of history, disappearing into a melting pot. Somewhere in a storage room behind a busy dealership, a decision was being made, not by a careless person, not by someone indifferent to history, or ignorant of what they were holding, but by someone doing exactly what the market had made rational. In front of them sat a collection, decades of carefully accumulated coins, each one carrying a story older than most living investors, each one representing a specific moment in the economic and cultural history of the civilization that minted it. And the math, the cold, indifferent math of a silver market, running at elevated spot prices, said melt. So they melted. This is the transformation that the collector market is currently living through, but rarely discussing openly. And for the business community, for serious investors, for anyone thinking carefully about tangible assets and their long-term value, this transformation carries consequences that will not be visible on any chart today, but will be felt clearly in the years ahead. To understand what is happening, one must understand how the coin collecting market has always maintained its own internal logic. A silver coin carries two values simultaneously. The first is its melt value, the raw worth of the metal it contains, calculable, predictable, tied directly to whatever the spot price says on any given morning. The second is its numismatic value, the worth assigned by collectors, historians, and the market of serious buyers who understand that certain coins are not simply metal, they are artifacts. For most of modern collecting history, these two values existed in reasonable relationship. The melt value sat beneath the coin like a foundation. the numismatic value rose above it, based on rarity, condition, historical significance, and collector demand. As long as that relationship held, the collecting market functioned with stability. The rally broke that relationship for an entire category of coins. When silver spot prices surged, the melt value of countless common silver coins rose sharply enough to compress the gap between what a coin was worth as metal and what it was worth as a collectible. For rare coins with strong numismatic premiums, this compression barely mattered. Their collectible value sat high enough above melt that the rally simply lifted them further. But for common coins, the ones that existed in relatively large numbers, the ones that carried modest numismatic premiums, the ones that formed the foundation of most mid-level collections, the compression was devastating, in a way that almost nobody in the mainstream conversation acknowledged. Because here is the economic reality that the melting pot exposed. When melt value rises close enough to collectible value, the incentive to preserve the coin disappears. A dealer holding 500 common silver coins at a modest numismatic premium suddenly finds himself doing different arithmetic when spot price surges. The premium he would earn from selling those coins individually to collectors over several months begins to look smaller than the immediate return from sending them to a refinery and converting them to generic silver by the end of the week. So the coins disappear, not dramatically, not with any public announcement, quietly, efficiently, permanently. And here is the consequence, that the market is not fully absorbed yet. Common coins become rare not through any romantic process of historical recognition or sudden collector awakening. They become rare because enough of them got melted during a rally that the surviving population quietly contracted while nobody was paying attention. The collector who dismissed those coins as common during the rally may discover in 5 years that the supply he assumed was abundant has been permanently reduced by the arithmetic of a single market moment. There is a business principle operating silently inside this reality. Scarcity is not always announced. It is not always obvious at the moment it is created. Sometimes scarcity is manufactured in the background of a market event that everyone is watching for completely different reasons. The silver rally gave the financial world a price story to follow. But behind that price story, in storage rooms and dealer back offices and refinery intake queues, a different story was being written. A story about what gets preserved and what gets erased. When the math stops favoring history. The coins that survived that melting pot did not survive because they were lucky. They survived because someone understood their value before the market reduced everything to a single number. And the ones that didn't survive will never be common again. There's a moment in every market cycle that separates two kinds of people. Not the rich from the poor, not the experienced from the beginner, not the lucky from the unlucky. It separates the people who understood what the market was telling them from the people who were only listening to what they wanted to hear. That moment in the silver market is right now, somewhere across this world tonight. 3 different people are sitting with silver in their hands. The first person is a stacker, methodical, patient, proud of the weight accumulating quietly in their safe. They have been watching the spot price climb and feeling the satisfaction of someone whose conviction appears to be paying off. The second person is a collector, thoughtful, historically minded. They have spent years building something that carries meaning beyond its metal content. But lately they have been noticing that the coins they assumed would always be available are becoming harder to find at the prices they once expected. The third person is a dealer, practical, operating on thin margins, navigating a market that has become simultaneously more exciting and more complicated than anything they managed before the rally. All 3 of them are holding the same metal, but all 3 of them are facing completely different problems. And the strategic framework that each of them needs right now is the same framework. It begins with a single, uncomfortable question. Not, what is my silver worth today, but how quickly can I convert my silver to cash tomorrow without losing a significant portion of what the spot price is currently promising me? That question is the liquidity question. And it is the question that most silver holders have never seriously asked themselves because the market never forced them to until now. Every silver position currently held anywhere in the world falls into one of 3 categories. The first category is immediately liquid silver. This is the silver that a dealer will take without hesitation. Standard recognized bullion, popular government minted coins, clean, verified, easy to process bars from established refineries. This silver converts to cash the same day. It carries competitive buyback prices. It moves through the supply chain without resistance. For the serious investor, this is not simply the most convenient silver to own. It is the silver that functions as a genuine financial instrument rather than simply a physical asset. The second category is conditionally liquid silver. This is where the conversation becomes more complicated and more important. Conditionally liquid silver includes older coins with modest numismatic premiums, smaller or less recognized bars, silver from refineries that certain dealers do not regularly work with. and any silver whose condition, documentation, or provenance creates hesitation at the point of sale. The silver can be sold, but it cannot always be sold quickly, cleanly, or at the number the spot price suggested was available. The seller of conditionally liquid silver enters every transaction with less leverage than they realize, and in a volatile market, reduced leverage translates directly into reduced returns. The third category is capital at risk. This is the silver that the market has quietly reclassified without notifying its owners. Heavily worn coins whose numismatic value has eroded, but whose melt value hasn't risen enough to make them attractive to refineries processing at scale. Silver in formats that the current dealer network finds inconvenient or unprofitable to handle. Pieces purchased at significant premiums during peak demand periods whose buyback prices have not followed the same trajectory as the spot price climb. Owners of this silver are not necessarily facing disaster, but they are holding positions that require serious strategic reconsideration before the next major market movement arrives. For the entrepreneur and the business-minded investor reading this framework clearly, the immediate action is not panic. The immediate action is audit. Every silver position should be examined through the liquidity lens rather than the price lens. Not what does this cost to replace, but what will this actually return if I need to sell it under real market conditions in the next 30 days? That gap between those two numbers is the true risk profile of the position. Beyond the audit, the strategic rebuild begins with 3 deliberate decisions. The first decision is relationship capital. In a stressed market, the investor with an established dealer relationship converts silver faster and at better prices than the investor who walks in as a stranger. Dealer relationships are not simply convenient. In a volatile market, they are a competitive advantage that directly affects returns. The second decision is format discipline. Going forward, every silver purchase should be evaluated not only on price, but on how easily and quickly that specific format moves through the current dealer network. Convenience at the point of purchase must be matched by liquidity at the point of sale. Otherwise, the investor has not bought silver. They have bought a storage problem with a promising label on it. The third decision is exit clarity. Every position needs a plan that exists before the moment of urgency arrives. Not a vague intention, not a general preference. A specific, realistic, tested understanding of exactly how that silver converts to cash under current market conditions. The investor who builds that plan today will execute it with confidence tomorrow. The investor who assumes the plan will reveal itself when the moment arrives. We'll discover, as many already have, that the market does not slow down to accommodate people who are figuring things out under pressure. The silver market has already changed. The infrastructure has already been stressed. The collector landscape has already shifted. The liquidity tiers have already separated. None of this is speculation. None of this is doom. It is simply the market, doing what markets always do when pressure arrives fast enough to reveal what was hidden during the comfortable years. The man who drove to his dealer with a decade of patient stacking and left with less than the spot price promised did not fail because silver failed him. He failed because he trusted a single number to answer a question that number was never designed to answer. The collector who watched common coins disappear into the melting pot did not lose because history lost its value. They lost because the market's arithmetic moved faster than their understanding of it, and the dealer navigating razor-thin margins through a volatile supply chain is not the villain of this story. They are simply the clearest mirror of what the market has become. The question for every serious participant sitting with silver right now is not whether the price will rise or fall. That question belongs to speculators. The question for the serious investor, the entrepreneur, the wealth builder thinking in decades rather than days, is whether they understand what they are actually holding, not its weight, not its spot value, not its historical significance, but its real, honest, tested liquidity in the market that exists today, not the market they imagined when they first made the purchase, because in the end, silver does not lie. The market does not lie. The only thing that lies is the comfortable assumption that a number on a screen tells the whole story. It never did. And now, the market has made certain that nobody has an excuse to believe otherwise.